of my, personal slide out of balance, out of harmony. That nothing in that world was helping me to regain that harmony again. And it was through that I discovered the world of shamanic arts, energy.
Hi, my name is Yana. Thank you for watching. This episode starts with an audio introduction and continues with the video content. So remember to watch it until the end. And subscribe to this channel, leave a comment, share with friends. Thank you for being here and listening to timeless teachings.
Hi, my name is Yana, and you are listening to the Timeless Teachings podcast. Today, our guest is Iran-born musician, teacher, and sound therapist who spent his formative years in the UK and many working years in the United States. And currently, he lives and creates in Bali. Shervin Boloorian is truly a sound magician, and today, we will be talking about the history, science, and philosophy of mantra and chanting. Let's begin. Shervin, thank you for joining us today. It is a pleasure to have you with us.
Hello, Yana. Nice to see you.
Yes, and before we dive into the subject of today, what I would like to ask first is a little bit about your own story. How did you actually get so connected with sound?
Well, I'll try to keep it brief because it's kind of an epic story. But sound and music has been my passion. As you know, someone who really studies sound and gets into the thickness of what sound is about, then we start to realize that we actually exist in a whole ocean of sound. Everything around us has a vibratory signature and presence to it. And I feel that, one of the main ways in which I discovered the power of sound and particularly the voice was as a child when I was a refugee. I was born in Iran, and when I was 3 years old, I had to move to the UK, and I grew up in the UK. And, there was moments where it was quite troublesome and quite a lot of pressure and stress. And I remember, one of the ways in which I could self-soothe and get myself out of this feeling of high pressure and tension as a kid was just humming to myself, singing to myself, and basically just kind of creating little songs that would be like my own little vitamins that I would need to get through the day during those times that were not so easy. So that was my initial approach. And as I grow older, my direction of my career turned. I was in a band, but I decided to leave all that behind because when you're the son of Middle Eastern parents, you have to kind of do something that's practical and that's worth the honor of the family. So I had to ditch music, and I went into the direction of policy and politics and learning about laws, and that was a good experience because I got into the world of social justice and kind of environmentalism and just activism through that process. So that was where my career took me, to Washington, D.C. I worked for a state senator when I was much younger as an aide, and I was in a fellowship program, and then I moved to D.C. where I worked for a think tank that was supporting the California congressional delegation. And then after that, I got into foreign policy, and particularly working on issues of U.S.-Iran relations and supporting more dialogue and trying to prevent the war from Iraq to spread into Iran at that time. So it was all of this that kind of built up, and all I can say is that in that moment when I was in the thick of so much stress and pressure, again, this time in Washington, D.C., and this time it was something that I had put on myself because it was my career. I had chosen to be there. And I started to realize that I was getting sick. I was getting into a place where I was stagnating, and I was feeling stuck in so many different ways. And fortunately, because I couldn't get any aid from the medical professionals that was sustainable, that was lasting. The many different treatments that I got was wonderful, but there was something that prevented the essence of my personal slide out of balance, out of harmony. That nothing in that world was helping me to regain that harmony again. And it was through that I discovered the world of shamanic arts, energy, and eventually sound. And I came back to my passion. I fell back in love with music and sound once I discovered that there was a way to use sound and music in a therapeutic manner, in a way that I could be in service. And I always say, Yana, that I feel that I could do much more in service of peace and security through this work that I'm doing now than I ever did in Washington, D.C. when I was working in that community, which was, again, it was a great experience, but it was just not for me at that time.
Yes, and I even saw that you won some awards for the peace songs, right? So it's exactly what you're saying. You are contributing to the world peace now in an entirely different way. This is such a powerful story. And I can say I can actually relate in some way. You were talking as a child of refugee and immigrants, right, in a new country, that you need to be practical. And I can tell you, when I was growing up in Russia and was born during the Soviet Union time, and then I wanted to be an actress. And this is exactly living with the single mom. So it's exactly what she said. She's like, well, go to business school. And then, as a passion, you can do acting. So I ended up playing at the university theater for all 4 years.
Wow,
So I understand that sometimes, depending on our circumstances, that we have to make certain choices. And however, which I hear in your story, and interesting enough, I can also see in my own life journey that eventually we still land where we're meant to be. So you wanted to be with the sound, you wanted to do this, and then life took you on this journey of adulthood, right? Trying to do something else, and look at you. So eventually you where you're meant to be. So that's beautiful.
Absolutely. and you know what, Yana? This journey that you and I have been on, this is really the essence of what sound therapy and sound healing is about. It's really finding your own vibration, finding that space for yourself where you can connect to your own music, that your music can interact with the world in a way that creates more music and more abundance with that music, and flow and harmoniousness. And so it's really the essence of sound healing, is that ability to really listen to what you're really about, who you really are. And you followed that, and I'm sure that there are many of your audience and listeners who have done the same thing. And those of us who are still struggling too. It's not something that, because we are still with so many pressures, and so many people want us to be something else that we're not.
This is a great way of saying it. Yes, the world has lots of expectations. And again, depending on which culture we are born into and what family, it could be more or less, but everyone has certain expectations from the world. And I love how you were saying about the sound healing. And fundamentally, it's also about the inner voice in a way, right? Because then when I'm listening to you describing the sound healing, so what comes up for me is this ability to also then listen to yourself by listening to what is happening around you in terms of music.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. The music is just a hint. The music itself is a clue. It gives you little indicators about where the focus needs to be. When you say listening, for example, you may be listening on a physical level, where you have to really sit with your pain, and you don't want to shoot out of your body because you don't want to experience that pain, or you want to avoid that pain, particularly people who deal with trauma, to try to be able to use music as a way to invite the spirit to come back into inhabiting the body. That's really one way in which this can work. And so you would work with certain frequencies and certain sounds and instruments that are tuned to bringing you into those physical spaces, particularly the lower vibrations. So, whether you're dealing with a physical, emotional, mental, spiritual challenge of any sort, music and sound can be there as a companion, as a friend, as a link and a bond to the world of the unseen, so that you can start to be able to pay attention and say, hey, yeah, thank you for guiding me back to myself. I needed to listen, and I needed to come back into alignment with this part of me. And, you know, anybody dealing with any kind of challenge can be able to get some assistance from this work.
And I love how you describe it. I actually didn't even think about it before, that we can consciously choose a certain vibration of music, right, for the particular experience that we want to have. And what you said, either on a physical, emotional, mental, or energetical level. So I find that's really powerful. And I think also even from a little bit that I know about the science in this regards, then it also corresponds with our brain waves, and it corresponds, right, with how the whole body is functioning. And there are various sound therapy tools and practices that are actually built on that idea that we connect through sound to different parts of ourselves. And then if we kind of also expand it, right, more, and we talk like what we're talking about, spirituality or mysticism or consciousness, and it's what you said at the beginning, sometimes people tend to space out too soon. And so that's right. So we go into those very high, we could call like angelic types of sounds, or cosmic type of sounds that is somewhere here, right? That bring you right straight to your highest chakras and centers, and you entirely bypass the physical body. And it's all wonderful, and you could have an incredible, you could say almost psychic experience through that sound, but then whatever is below on a physical level might not have been fully dealt with. And so that's actually a very important point actually to your highlighting here.
Absolutely. You need the full spectrum of sound. Just like in life, you have a full spectrum of vibrations and people and places and situations that you put yourself in. And if you consider your entire body as a community that needs different kinds of nourishment, you know, we can always appreciate we need different kinds of nutrition from food, but we also need different types of nutrition from other sources of energy, including sound. And so it's very incumbent upon us to be able to listen and realize, you know, when we're in, for example, a very emotionally volatile place, what can bring us into a place of smoothness and stasis? What can calm us and ground us in those moments? And so on and so forth. And that's what music can do. We know it has its power to do that. It's universal. It reaches everybody in every part of the world. Every single spiritual tradition that you know has the power of music or the voice in some form or shape. There is no accident to that. It is meant to be a tool for us to find our way back home into our own vibration, into what we're really about, and to, this is also just as essential, and to be able to integrate with the world around us.
Yes, absolutely. And I was just recently talking to a friend, and she mentioned something what I think in psychotherapy they call pattern interrupt, right? And there is this term which I didn't even know exists, but in connection to the music and to the sound, like I know I definitely do this, and I have also seen other people doing that. So let's say if you're having a day which may be not too high on the emotional scale, right? And you need a bit of a boosting. And then you go and you turn on the music, which is really a party music, like very strong music, very active music. And then it's what you said, it changes. It changes the hormonal level. It changes the way how you look at everything. It changes how you feel about it. And actually in psychotherapy, they call it pattern interrupt. So, you know, it's interesting how it's all kind of connected. And
I have never heard that term before.
You're going to write it down. I love that. I just learned it yesterday through another interview. So that's why I'm doing those interviews, you know, so that I can learn each time when I talk to people.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yes.
Good idea. There's no better way, huh? You become a student and you also become a teacher. That's
Exactly. So the peace songs and the mantra songs, the chanting songs. I know that you have a variety of instruments you also use when you do the sound healing.
Yes.
I just would like to, at least right now with our conversation, to dive a little bit deeper into what people call mantras.
Yes.
Because again, it's universal, it's present in many traditions and many spiritual and mystical schools all over the world. And it is just very powerful. So I just would like to ask your understanding of what mantra is and why it is so powerful for us as humans.
Well, I think it's important to point out, when I teach sound healing to my students, that there are 3 different zones of energy in the Taoist system, and that there are 3 groupings of different types of instruments that I have. And I classify them and I group them as such. And I say that, a full sound journey is going to be able to have all of these 3 types of instruments that will send a person through those different energy centers from the very low frequencies all the way to the high. And I show them how to do that. And the one instrument that stands out the most is the human voice. It's the one that you can use for all 3 zones. My teacher, who is one of the pioneers of sound therapy, his name is Fabien Maman. He did research on human hemoglobin, under the microscope, and he examined how different instruments and different types of sound vibrations from natural sounds, so natural acoustic sounds, how that they could interact with blood and what would happen to that blood. And his discoveries were really, really fascinating. He looked at all different kinds of instruments, and he saw that the blood would start to empower and start to expand and change form and change color through very, very subtle vibrations. He did not have an amplifier. He was basically playing the instruments at about 30 centimeters distance from the petri dish with the blood. And he worked at the University of Jussou to do this with one of the clinicians there. And what he discovered was that the human voice was the most effective instrument of all the different ones that he studied in terms of being able to empower the blood and change the form and give it vitality. And then secondarily, he looked at HeLa cancer cells. He looked at actual cancer cells, and he also discovered he was looking at using a different research, a different set of tones, different intervals. He discovered that these cancer cells could explode through the use of pure natural sound. And again, the number one instrument that could do this the most effectively was the human voice.
Wow.
This is really one of those things that people do not pay a lot of attention to because our digital age has turned our voices and our expression into this.
Yeah, typing, written words or half-written words these days.
So even the process of speaking, and exchanging and having intimate dialogue with somebody, like you and I,
like we're doing right now, yes.
That there is an actual, vibratory experience that the cells are going through as the voice box is sending these vibrations throughout the body. And if we're actually very kind of centered and still and we tune into that, we can start to find a certain alignment. And this is one of the main ways in which mantra works. There's many, and I can go through them. But this process of being able to itself send a vibratory signal throughout your whole being. And people tend to think, for example, that you have to speak loudly when you do a mantra. And you'll always go to that yoga class and you'll be seated next to the guy or the girl who's just yelling out the mantra.
I definitely had those experiences. Sometimes when I was a girl like that.
Yes. Yes. I mean, we've both been there because this was the idea. It's like if you're at a rock concert, you've got to sing out loud. And if you're doing mantra, you got to do the same. But again, as a purely meditative experience, if you're in your stillness and if you're sending that vibratory kind of pulse throughout your body, you don't have to be speaking very loud. You don't have to be yelling. And you can still feel it traveling into the cells and doing that. So one of the ways in which mantra, man, mind, tool, but also related to the word transport or trajectory. It's a Sanskrit term. There are other traditions that have different terms, but this is what's happening. You're transmitting. You're transmitting a tool that can clear and center the mind in such a way that, then you can come to the next levels of mantra, which are, the meaning of the mantra itself. What is the utterance, trying to convey? Usually it's some kind of devotion. Usually it's some kind of, it doesn't have to be. It could be just a repetition of something that a particular quality or a particular attribute or value that you want to instill. That process of repetition.
It's like, I am peaceful, I am peaceful, I am peaceful, right? So
even I am, I exist, soham. So these things, that's one level as well. There's the meaning. And then there is the, a lot of mantras have a repetitive quality to them, right? So there is something about them that has a cadence that's almost rhythmic. So Om Tare Tutare Ture Swaha, Om Tare Tutare Ture Swaha, Om Tare Tutare Ture Swaha. You continue that, and you're going to get into a place where there is a rhythm, and that rhythm in itself does what's known as entrainment in the psychoacoustic world, which then alters the brain waves, because you're completely altering the rhythmic patterns of your existence. You're bringing in a rhythm like I am now as I speak to you, and this will inevitably. If you want to go even deeper than that, there's the quality of the utterance itself and the vowels and the consonants that are within. It's not even not just the meaning, but when you say the word, the vowel ah, there is an energy. When you say e, there is an energy. When you say sh, there is an energy. And so these are all put together, and these old masters, these sages that put together these mantras, they, were very wise. And that's why we tune into these older languages, right? Like Sanskrit and Arabic and Persian and Tibetan. These are ancient languages, and there was more of a understanding that certain utterances have an energy to them themselves. So when you put together the energy of those utterances, you're actually creating these stimulations and sedations all on their own, based on the words that you're saying. And in certain languages in the past, certain vowels or consonants were even banned because they evoked too much of an energy that society couldn't handle.
Wow.
So you can go into the very, very fine precision point examination of this work, or you can look at it on a global scale. And, the last level of mantra, which has a strong effect, is what's known as the energy field that is created. There is a sacredness that is created when millions and millions of people are repeating the same utterances over and over and over again. Then you create what's known as an energy field. Rupert Sheldrake would call it a morphogenetic field. It's something that your presence can tap into because it's hanging there in the whole energy of human experience. It's like something in the subconsciousness. It's something that, collective unconscious that, we hear about in the Jungian psychology, for example. What is he talking about? Well, there is some energetic, generators that we tap into whenever we bring in an image or even a word or an utterance. And so that is something that you're also tapping into. You're tapping into the power of these utterances. And when someone has been chanting the medicine mantra for, decades, and then their family has, going back, and their lineage goes back for centuries, and so on and so forth, there is an energy field that you cannot mistake that you are tuning into. So you have the global level, you have the meaning level, you have the, the rhythmic level, you have the words and the utterances themselves. And there is so many different ways to be able to disaggregate a mantra and be able to say, hey, this is how the energy is working. So it's whatever works for you, but it's that process of showing up to the mantra that's important. And really, we need it today because we have mantras that are going on telling us that we're nothing, we're nobody.
Where do we have mantras like that?
Well, we have them in commercials.
Okay, so the media, the traditional media, you could say.
We are bombarded,
with
these mantras,
simulations. Yes,
with jingles and all kinds of industries that are based on mantras that pierce the consciousness and tell you, hey, take this product, or even back to our childhood where we may have had parents or family members who just didn't know what they were doing or saying
particularly, right? Yes.
Yeah. And so when you hear that these messages, when people say, I'm just doing or I'm repeating the same things that my parents did, and I didn't even realize it. I thought I would never do that. How is that even possible? I've told myself I'd never be like that. And then you start to realize, well, this has pierced the consciousness because it's the power of what a mantra can do. Someone has been telling you that, you're not going to amount to anything, or, that you look ugly, or you look this, or you look that. After a while, you're going to have to find a way to reverse that script. And this is what these very, very ancient mantras do. They reverse the script that take us out of the negative human experience, the more conflicted and confrontational and very competitive experience of life, and bring us back into a state of harmony with ourselves, with our voices, with each other.
I love that. And I love how you expand the definition of mantra to pretty much any phrase that is repetitive. Right? So we could take a marketing slogan, we could take a certain sentence that the parent used to say over and over and over. We could take something we're saying to ourselves over and over and over in any language, right? And then, of course, you can also go into those ancient languages, and it's the same, that were specifically composed for liberation.
That's right.
That's pretty much what it is.
Beautifully put. Yes.
Right? And then just listening to what you shared, which I find just phenomenal information. And also the reason why I love doing those interviews, because I myself is a practitioner. So I just do the practice. And I guess just the way how my mind is wired is a little bit more Eastern, even though I look Western. So I don't ask questions like, how does that work? Or why is it important? If my teacher tells me just do that, I'm like, okay, and I'm just going to do this. But I know for most people, at least for Western people, just the way how our brain functions and how we brought up in the society, we first need to understand why and how it works before we do anything, right? So that's why I feel it's so important that you so powerfully described different ways how mantra can influence us and why it is important. And I have a few questions.
Go right ahead. I love it. Which
I heard actually from other people, because I have been also working now with people for a very long time. And every time, and of course, we do use music and giving, mantras also to people. And so questions actually come from them. Yeah. And one of the first, most common one which I hear is, let's say if a mantra is in Sanskrit.
Yeah.
Right? And a person somewhere from West who is not very familiar with Asian culture to begin with, and then we give the mantra, or we start chanting mantras, so we include the mantras, or maybe give it to someone as part of the practice. And what I hear sometimes from people, well, I don't understand. I cannot connect because I don't understand the meaning. And then even if I understand the meaning in English, it doesn't make sense to me. Right? So because it's just some kind of very high type of language that I don't understand. And because intellectually I don't fully understand, I'm not sure it's working because I don't know how to connect with that. And yet what you're saying, that especially mantras that are composed in the ancient language, because that those mantras were researched in the particular way and put together based on the sound, right? And also the meaning to it. They are, from my understanding, the most powerful ones. And yes, we can use a common language. We can use, like now we speak in English, we can use English language or any other native language that people are using when they're having a conversation. But in terms of power, when I just listened to your description of mantra, it is actually not as strong as the ancient ones.
Yes, that's correct.
Right?
That's correct, yeah. So the question is, how can someone benefit from mantra if they don't understand what they're saying?
It's more that people just don't always, they just don't always want to chant it. The Sanskrit mantras, right?
Yeah.
So
of course.
Say, look, I don't understand. You tell me it's good for me, okay, but it's a language I don't understand. So it doesn't resonate.
I think that there's that. There's also some people that think, if I'm going to be chanting a Sanskrit mantra that's about Hinduism.
Yes, exactly. Hinduism, Buddhism, right? Am I converting? If I'm a Christian, for example, right?
Like,
yes.
There's some people that feel this threat. And all I would say is, there is no desire to change anybody's faith. There is simply an understanding that words have power. Mm-hmm. And we can all understand that. We can all appreciate that. And we can all appreciate that even in Judeo-Christian traditions, that we have psalms and we have hymns and we have our own mantras that go along with those things, and imagery. For example, when we think of the white Tara in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and we have the Om Mani Padme Hum chant that is also connected to the white Tara. Sometimes we have to put it in those archetypal terms, that this is an energy that is very similar to Mother Mary. Mm-hmm. That the essence of what you're carrying, the vibratory essence, is not something that is lost across ethnic lines or across geographic boundaries. This is a universal power. And so it's just simply being able to find something where you can relate to the energy. You can relate to words like compassion and forgiveness and comfort and safety. These are all of what the white Tara presents, And then, I had a friend of mine who also is part Native American, and she'd also bring in, the white buffalo calf woman has that exact same energy. And that's so she would apply to that type of archetype as well. So when we're looking at certain deities and Saraswati and various others, we can't always get a sense of what it is that we're trying to call in. And I think it's very important to at least have some understanding of an equivalent in our own lives, in our own cultures. But I don't by any means believe that just because you don't get Saraswati, that you can't be able to tune into the energies of wisdom, of knowledge, of science, of learning, of all of these wonderful attributes that she represents, and the essence that she carries. Before something exists, it has to be in the form of the spoken word, from the thought to the word to the deed. So we're just taking that idea of when the Lord God spoke, then that's the first line of the Bible, right?
Yes. Yes.
So this is what happens. You can create your own destiny. You can create good things for yourself, and you're just tapping into an energy that's already there. It's universal. It binds the entire consciousness of humanity, and you just have to be able to find a way to perceptualize it.
I find it is very, very important for people also to understand. And like in my understanding, spirituality is just so much bigger that the religion itself, right? Because there's a certain division across religion, and unfortunately in our world right now, and spirituality is like a big umbrella that tries to unite, and then you also can be not religious at all, and you can be deeply spiritual. So it's really, like I have met some phenomenal people who call themselves atheists, and they're deeply spiritual. So
absolutely. Isn't that strange? What a paradox. Huh?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's really...
what I find, Yana, is usually there are people who are, when you think about this word atheist, it's like anti, I am not.
Yes.
And it's getting to a point where a person can just say, to be spiritual doesn't necessarily mean that you have to burn incense and,
Exactly.
ring bells and these kinds of things. It's really about getting into your who you are, what you're,
and just being true to that,
asking
right?
those questions.
Yeah, and listening to
true
this
to
inner
yourself.
voice. That's what we were
Yes.
talking about,
Yeah.
listening to your inner voice.
That's
and
right.
just
Yeah.
there are some common values that are common to everyone, like most cultures all over the world, when we talk about just be a good human being. That's it.
Yes.
In whatever understanding it is true for you.
That's right. And each of these deities, for example, that we can express to, if we can think of it in those terms that you're talking about, that, there's goodness that comes from having Ganesha remove obstacles, that I can also call on myself to remove obstacles because this energy is with me, or if I'm in a rainstorm and I need a protection mantra to just kind of help me focus myself as I'm working through the rainstorm. It's just simply a device. It's simply a tool for bringing good things into your presence. You have to have this presence to be able to know that you're dealing with what you're dealing with in the moment, that you're not pulled out of your experience simply by saying, I'm just going to do this. It's just going to be a chore. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it. No matter what. Someone's coming at me with a knife. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to do this. No, you have to be present with where you're at, and you have to kind of tune in and say, look, I still need to defend myself, or I still need to, take certain actions. But the mantra itself can help you find that presence, can help you come into a state of stronger awareness. So that's how it works to me.
Yes, I can definitely see this and resonate with that. And for all the people who are watching us and listening to us, that also just this is a very, very important point. So if you're coming particularly from a certain family or school of believers, or maybe if you follow any particular religion, right? And then now we talk about mantras, and mantras largely associated with the Eastern world, right? And the Eastern cultures, just the word itself, mantra, right? We don't use mantra for Western cultures. So, and it's exactly what you said. It's the ability to see the essence. This is basically what you were saying. So if you are introduced to the mantras through, let's say, a program or a course you're doing, or maybe your teacher is giving you a mantra, and there's maybe a cultural misunderstanding or certain cultural disconnect, don't use this as an excuse not to practice. This is my point, right?
Absolutely.
Then if you understand, do your own research, find some commonalities with your own culture, connect to the essence of the energy.
Absolutely. I'm Iranian. I was born in Iran, and, there are some beautiful mantras from the Sufi and from the Muslim tradition. But I found very, very hard for me because of the stigma that is so prevalent around Islam and the association with the negative things, with violence and all of this.
Even though Sufi is an incredible tradition.
Or even the religion itself, but because there's just such an immediate, what's happened to our connotation, what's happened to our consciousness when it comes to this word Islam. It immediately goes into a place which is quite negative. And so to think, that I would be chanting, I did a whole album on, Sufi chants and words in Arabic that are like Allahu Akbar. And to repeat Allahu Akbar, that this was an actual journey for me. Like I was having a really hard time at first because being someone who was raised in the West, and there's this immediate, that's a term that's used by terrorists and so on. You're missing. I was missing the point. I was missing the point of the value of this incredible mantra that has to do with something far greater than my petty experience of what the news tells me about what goes on with this world of Islam. And so I really had to dig deep. And each time you do these mantras, you can go on a journey and dig deep, because you will find in your own way, your own personal application to the challenges that the mantra itself present to you. And within the seeds of the challenges that you're dealing with lies always the solution and the resolution. So it's a journey.
Yes. And again, it is just such a powerful example of how deeply we are conditioned as human beings by media and by largely by words, actually, right? By sound, in whatever way and configuration it gets to our brain. Right now, we're just overstimulated by everything around us, and regardless of what country we are located physically at the moment. And it's just a big part of liberation, because I can't find a better word right now. So it's a big part of the liberation. This process of liberating yourself is actually removing those cultural conditioning and certain social, often political conditioning that has nothing to do really with the essence of it. And this ability that you said, and I can imagine for someone like you who is coming from that region, so those are your roots. So for you, it is fundamental to reconnect with them, just for your own power. And it's like for anyone else. And I find particularly refugees or immigrants, and I am one of them because I was born in Russia and then I left, right? And I traveled the world and now I live in Asia. But I also went through a massive identity crisis, like earlier in my life, where you live abroad long enough that you no longer can fully relate to the culture of your origin. You're like a tourist there when you go, but also you might not fully merge with the culture you're currently living in, right? So you're kind of in this in-between space and you become, okay, what am I? And what is my identity in like just mentally? And I find it also, I think pretty much every mystical teacher I have spoke to, that always talk about the importance of roots and connection and ancestors and lineage. What you use this word, right? Our DNA. So yes, maybe we grew up in a different country, and right now we live in a very global world. Well, maybe before COVID, I'm not sure how it's gonna be now, but it was a very global world. And at the same time, I feel that many people just lose their connection to their lineage. And it's so beautiful that you reconnected by doing that, by recording this album, by finding this within yourself. You actually reconnected with your roots, and there's a lot of power in that. So congratulations to you for doing that. I think that's just phenomenal.
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing that. I just want to say, music is so powerful. There's no aspect of human construct that can withstand music. There's this famous quote, if we're making music together, it's impossible for us to be in conflict with each other.
Yes.
So, I've been, I find that music, when I needed it in my different stages of my life, has really shown up to me, because it's so much more primal than, the different things that you learn in school that tell you that we're so different and that we're so vastly divided, and that there's a unifying force that isn't just woo-woo. It's music. It's a real thing. We know it because when we listen to it and we're in a concert and we've got thousands of people around us, you can't deny that you feel at one with every single person in that stadium. And that's something that is to behold. This is something to really praise and be thankful for. So I'm sure, I'm not the only one who's felt this way, but that connection to my roots, I really had to, if it wasn't for music, I wouldn't have it at all.
Yes, you see, and yet it's so important. So you found it, and it's exactly what you're saying about the concept. And I'm sure everyone had this experience at least once in your life.
Yes.
Like everyone who is listening to us, at least once, when you went particularly to the concert with a lot of people, a band or a singer that you really like, and music you really connect. And somewhere in the middle of it, usually there's really this moment when you feel like one heart. Yes. When audiences goes wild,
yes.
and not necessarily expressive wild, when there's a lot of sound and screaming, it could be internally wild, when there's just stillness and silence in the audience because everyone is so deeply connected. And those are just incredibly consciously expansive moments.
Yeah, so you got goosebumps just talking about it because you're transported right there. You can
Yes,
really put yourself in that space. And I wonder what music it was for you. Can you remember one time when you felt that?
Yes, actually, as I was describing it, what came to my memory was one of the recent Bali spirit festivals.
Oh, wow.
And I remember that that was my experience of a very, we could say spiritual music, but presented in a very rock type of way, right? So the spiritual music, I mean, often we associate with the chanting mantras and just like something sitting and being still. And those I remember just, they were like rock bands, you know, like doing like really strong, strong soundtracks, but the lyrics were deeply connected. So you have someone who wants to go and say hi in the camera.
My sons, come, Baba.
Yes, come say hi.
Come and say hi. These are my sons who just arrived. These are my rock stars.
Hello, boys. Look at
twins.
you.
This is
hi.
Ron and Aiden.
Wow, nice to meet you. I'm Yana.
This is Yana.
Hi.
She's interviewing Baba.
That's cool.
Cool. Will you listen later to the interview?
She asked if you will listen later to the interview.
Maybe, yes. That's what I would say if I were that age. Who cares what Daddy is talking about?
Go ahead, you guys can play. Nice to see you.
Beautiful.
Go ahead and play, but see if you can stay off the internet.
That was truly wonderful.
Love you.
Yes. So the Bali Spirit Festival, and I remember that I was like, wow, that's how I feel we all should be growing up. Because I remember when I was, in high school, we were all listening to this stronger, rocky type of music, right? But the lyrics sometimes were really questionable because you still take it in. I mean, yes, you might like the melody and you listen to the music, but you take in the words subconsciously.
Yeah, of course,
and I would rather take in something which is more empowering rather than something that provokes like violence or sorrow or pain or being heartbroken. I'm like, why do I need that? I don't want that.
This is so true, and this is why a lot of us, particularly sensitive people, we just get repulsed by music. Like, I didn't want to be a rock and roller. I didn't want to be on stage and try to get people to order drinks from a bar or just be in a smoky environment. It just feels there's a lot of toxicity that goes along with the music industry. And you could say, hey, it's just fun. It's just people having a lot of fun, and there's something to be said about people who just want to party and have fun. But there's some of us that really want to know what happens after the party stops, and we want to be able to not be so numb. Yeah. Because the reality is that the reason why all of these types of artists have gotten as much notoriety as they have is because life. Life in the city is rough, and it requires a lot of numbing of the senses. And so there's music that can appeal to that, and naturally so, because people don't want to think all the time or feel. They just want to boogie and dance, or they just want to show resistance and show try to act against power and so on. And so, I really loved growing up. I loved industrial music, loved Gothic music. And even now, when I listen to that music, I can find things that I really love about that style. But I also realized that, I was in a place where I was confused. I was not really in tune with myself. I was completely out of alignment with where I wanted my life to go. And I think a lot of young people are in these same kinds of places, so I don't blame them that these kinds of things happen. This is art. Art is just like any kind of holistic therapy. Sometimes you get it, and sometimes you don't get it. Sometimes it appeals and resonates, and sometimes it doesn't. And so for me to be able to just at least recognize, hey, I don't want to subject myself to things that kind of fry my brain or fry my that poisoned my blood and this sort of thing. It took me a long time to realize that, hey, life can be different. Life can be, I can live from a different place. So it's just a lot of awareness, and you don't have to be in that state of mind to be able to still feel that euphoria that you look for. You can even use mantra to be able to access that euphoria.
Yes, and I do have quite a few friends who are in the music industry, and they do different things. Like some of them more into like mantra, spiritual type of music, other, what you said, more for show business and stage and let's get the stadium together type of music, right? And I spend time with different people, and of course, because we're friends, they're just being very honest, and that's exactly what you said. What happens after party? What happens when they go off the stage? And I even interviewed a few people who are and have been really big stars when it comes to music, like they were on stages. And to be honest, every single person that comes from a mass media and mass production, it's a heartbreaking life story, like heartbreaking. So what they have to deal with and what happens behind the camera, and of course the amount of either pills from the doctors or drugs from the friend, that they have to take in order to be able to cope with everything, and just still even that the very unhuman in a way schedule for touring, when you have to just on and on and on and on.
And you have to recreate that party atmosphere every time.
Atmosphere, and be 100% regardless of how you feel and what is happening. And then that really squeezes the life force out of people, and then they collapse, and then they come and see me, and they're like, Yana, I don't want this life anymore. And I go like, well, I understand. So let's see.
This is one of the reasons I got into this work too, Yana, is that as musicians, there isn't a lot of choice for us out there. We have an option of going into the world of entertainment and show business, and basically trying to use, image and popularity to be able to substitute for whatever. Talent is not really the priority. I'm saying that this is one of the reasons why I wanted to get into this field, because I also feel like it's important for other people who want to share their music in the world, that they don't have to go down the path of destructive lifestyle, particularly the sensitive ones among us who love music, who have a lot of music to share. I mean, there's so many musical geniuses that have, before they were even in their 30s, taken their own lives.
Yes, we know in the history.
Or have had tragedies, that have swallowed them up. And, it doesn't have to be that way. Music can be an incredible service. It can be incredibly rewarding to share music in such a way where you don't have to be this person that has to fire up the party every night. Instead, you can come from an entirely different place and really get people internal and get people into their hearts. And when I finish my sessions and I look around and I feel, and I see the response, and I feel the energy of the room. It's completely different energy than how it started, and you just get this sense of like, this is something that people, they don't even have to say a word to you, and I can feel that they have appreciated what it is that they've sensed, because they're in a much more relaxed and still place than they were when they got there. And that to me is something, it's something to reclaim for musicians. Yes. It's an honored tradition to create music. In the times of the Celtic ages back in Ireland, the bard, the sound healers of those times were known as bards, and they had the equivalent of status as the king or the queen.
Wow.
There is such a high reverence for being able to do this work. And, and we have to reclaim that. I often say that I feel that the music industry has hijacked the world of sound and music, because it's packaged in a way now where people, particularly musicians, if they don't fit that mold, that, they end up like me. doing something else entirely for most of their lives. And I just, there is more to it. And there is a high value and a high credit to doing this work. It's a very noble craft. It is artistry, and it is also energy. And it's just a beautiful thing to see musicians, particularly who I've worked with, to say thank God, because I didn't want to anymore go and be on a stage and just feel like I'm just playing cover songs all the time of the B-52s or the Beatles or whatever. It's fine, that's got its place, but it can, if you think about it, if you're doing that every night,
yes,
that's the way people relate to you. It becomes very dissatisfying.
Yeah, yes. And just as we are coming soon to an hour of our conversation, I'm just looking at the time, and it was
wow, that went by quick.
Exactly. I was like, wow, I could talk to you for another hour. However, let's slowly wrapping it up. And just one thing actually a few things that still I would like to talk about, and just want to share that I just spent 1 month in Goa, and I think we talked with you about it. Probably I mentioned, and I met a lot of musicians there. So I went to lots of concerts, and I just met a lot of local musicians, and that was a very interesting one for me to see the difference between people who had to smoke or do whatever they need to do in order to get on stage, and people who would just get on stage and be equally energized and
isn't
perform.
That interesting?
And then I would walk up to those people who just got on stage without any external stimulations and have this energy, and I would ask them, so what do you do? And do you know what they told me? Every single one. They said, well, I have a practice, and I practice. So I have my own spiritual practice, either given to me by the teacher, which is most of the time, or they developed it over the years. And they say, so while all my colleagues, do what they need to do to get this energy to actually go on stage, I go deep within myself and I do my own either mantra chanting or whatever practice that I follow, and that energizes me. And then I go and perform. And I was like, wow, okay, spiritual connection here again. I like that.
Amazing. Every single one of them, huh? I told you that.
So every single one who I saw would not take any substances,
alcohol,
or whatever they do, right? In order to get on stage.
Right. That's brilliant. That's an amazing observation. Wow.
Yes, that was really interesting. And there's also one more thing, because I feel it's really important, and you shared this a little bit earlier in our conversation today. You were talking about the rhythm, mantra and rhythm, right?
Yeah, sure.
And you said that the way, so when we chant mantras, so particularly when we chant ancient mantras, like let's say the Sanskrit-based mantras, they come with a certain rhythm to it. And so what I wanted to just as briefly talk about, that like some of my teachers, let me put it this way, right, who are practitioners more in a traditional way, and they come like from the yogic or some kind of monastic background and lineages, right? So then there is this chanting that has been transmitted from a teacher to student, generation after generation, in a very particular way how they do this, and that's why it charges the certain words with this particular energy, right? So then there is this way of doing that. And so I'm going to be devil advocate here, okay?
Okay.
So they are actually not particularly thrilled when they see that people take those ancient Sanskrit mantras and change the rhythm in order to compose a song, right? So because then that becomes popular. And there are many artists, right, who do this. I mean, we interpret it in our own way, and we add our own rhythm and our own tune to this. However, if we look at it from the practice point of view, and from the ancient traditional practice point of view, then according to masters who are in those lineages, that we take power away from that in a way. So I don't know, what is your, I know it's a little bit like a poking.
No. I really appreciate this question, because I think there's different ways, like we've just established that mantra can be used in different ways. It has different powers. And also, we're human beings, and the accent that you have is different than the accent that I have. And if I was in England, whether I'm in the north or the east or the south or the west, I'll have a different accent and a way of saying something. In India, it's the same thing. In, the Middle East, everywhere in the world, we are going to have different cultures and different ways in which we're going to access language. Mantra is based on language, and it's based on the building blocks of language. It's based on those consonants and vowels that are there. And still, we have these different ways of being able to access those places. So if you're someone who is very advanced and you want to get into those advanced places, then, you would probably want to work with a master to get there. But for most of us, we just want to be able to appreciate and be able to enjoy and be able to have an access point into this world. And some people will say the same about yoga, right?
Yes.
You're not doing yoga right. You can't do it. In fact, if you do yoga with more than one person in the room, that's not what they did. In the ancient times, you had one teacher and one student. And you would be, working with each other, and that was it. But this is what we need today. I would tell those masters, I would say, please look around the world today. We are in so desperate need of wisdom. And not all of us are able to access that place that you are. We need a place to start. And we need encouragement to start there. And then once we get to a point where we feel that we want to go into a deeper place and we want to seek out a teacher and a master that can help us, because some of us are inevitably going to feel a real resonance with this work, then they're going to go into a place where they're going to perhaps want to get more specific about these things. But even then, like I said, our language is a vast thing. I'm someone who firmly believes we need guides, we need teachers. I've seen in the sound healing world, a lot of my colleagues, a lot of the people around me, they don't know what they're doing and they're calling themselves sound healers. It's despicable.
Yeah.
And for professionals to be being paid to do that, it's just, it doesn't honor the craft. It doesn't honor the field of study. And, I am someone who went through that process, but I also had a starting point. And I needed that starting point, and I needed to be able to say that this stuff really is going to work for me and apply for me. And to be able to get there, I feel like these ancient terms and these ancient lines and these ancient texts, they all have a beautiful quality to them, and we need them now more than ever, particularly in this age where we are so disconnected and we're so on the verge. We are on the brink, really, of destruction, of self-destruction. So I would ask for their patience, and I would ask for their indulgence, because we are, we're getting to a point where at least people are starting to appreciate these little nuggets of wisdom that they never had before. And the reason why they're becoming more prevalent is because this is what the world needs right now.
Shervin, this is like such a beautifully powerful explanation. This is really, it's like almost like touching, it's very, very heartfelt and very honest and very true. And I can see and feel how deeply you mean it and how deeply it is true for you. And so I can feel that. And definitely every word that you said, the world needs teachings, the world needs wisdom. And we all have to start somewhere.
Yes.
And that's also a big reason why we are doing those interviews here with different people in this area of spirituality and consciousness and mysticism and just journey right towards your higher self and realization. Maybe for some people, it also becomes the beginning. And someone who is listening right now to us and our conversation goes, wow, maybe I should try sound healing. Oh, wow, maybe I should go deeper into mantras. Oh, wow, maybe I can actually connect with one of those masters and really understand how they use mantras for their transcendence. And if we can bring this a little bit even of inspiration to people's daily lives in our society, I feel that That was a great conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it too. It was nice to be able to talk to you. What great questions you had, and what great ability to just be present with me throughout the whole time. So thank you. Thank you for such an engaging talk. It didn't feel like we were doing an interview. It felt very, very
it felt
natural.
very, very natural. Exactly. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. God bless.
That was a powerful and deep dive into the world of music and sound. Did you enjoy the interview? Feel free to share this episode with friends, subscribe to the podcast, and follow us on social media. Stay wild and be humble. До встречи!